Welcome back, everyone. And today I want to dive into a topic that many people secretly deal with on a day-to-day basis, but most people in the ecosystem don't really want to admit. Our users don't actually hate Salesforce. What they do hate is the experience we've wrapped around it. You've all heard these classics. Salesforce is too slow. It's too complicated. I can't find anything, or it's easier to use my spreadsheet or whatever old system we've had before. I hear them across all kinds of different companies I work with, from universities to tech companies, and across all the different teams within an organization. And here's the key thing that I want you to take away out of this episode. When someone complains about Salesforce, they're actually not talking about Salesforce. What they are talking about is misalignment, unclear processes, a confusing setup, and a complete lack of training and ongoing support. So in this session, I want to dive into this, trying to decode some of these complaints for you, translate what users actually mean, and show you how you can turn all this frustration into something that's actually useful and beneficial for you as an organization, and more importantly, for your users. Because Salesforce complaints aren't really drama. They're just data, they're signals. And so it's important for us to understand them and read them properly so we can make a meaningful change. Now let's start with the greatest hits. If I had £1 every time I heard one of these, I would have been a very rich woman and probably already be retired. Things like, Salesforce is too slow. It's too complicated. I don't see the point of logging anything, let alone all my emails and calls. We have to click 1,000,000 times before we can update or save a record. It doesn't really match how we really work on a day-to-day basis. And one of the favorite ones, I'll just keep my own spreadsheet. It's so much faster than what Salesforce can do for us. And so when you hear these complaints, you might think like, these people, they're just resisting change and they don't want to log their data. Or they're just old school and they don't like modern new systems. And actually, the core in this is that these complaints are a symptom. They're not really the disease. But they're very incredible signals to think about what is wrong with our implementation. So let me see what some of this means beyond the surface. Let's go to some of them. Salesforce is slow. Well, often it's actually nothing to do with how Salesforce actually performs. It is incredibly fast when you're on your page. But the problem is, why they call it slow is most likely there's a lot of required fields they have to go through. Or the page layout is just confusing and not quickly for them to get to what they want to. Or they have to go through a lot of different screens before they can actually log a call, especially relevant for our call center people. And maybe there's no clear happy path. They don't really understand how they can quickly turn maybe an opportunity into a success, or maybe log a call or anything like that. And so slow doesn't really mean the platform is slow. It means that what we have built slows down their activities. It slows down their work. They spend too much time in the system and not that much time doing what they actually need to do. Now, another one is, it's too complicated. Most likely what that means is that they just have no clue what they are supposed to be doing. Often when you go into Salesforce, it looks very complex. You open a page and there's like a couple of hundred fields in there and a whole range of buttons, some of them hidden under a drop-down. And dashboards that might not actually mean anything for them. The data in there that they don't understand. What they need is actually somebody to come in and says, okay, for your role, here are the top 3 things that you do every single day. And here's how Salesforce is going to support you on that. So when people are telling you it's complex, what you have to do is actually figure out, have we actually explained to someone how to use the system for them to make sure that it makes sense for their job. Now, another one is, I don't see the point. Well, that's a biggie. And basically what it means is that they don't understand how the data is used. What is the benefit for them of logging all this information in there? They don't get a return on benefit for them. They don't see the ROI for themselves. And they often just things like Salesforce is just there for the management, for reporting, and maybe even this big brother feel. We want to track as an organization every single thing our users are doing. And so for them, Salesforce becomes this big black hole. They throw in all this data in there and it wastes a lot of time for them and they don't get anything back for that. And so what we have to change here in all our communication and all our training is actually explain to them why. Why are we logging all this information? not a why as for an organization, a why for our users. We want you to log these calls because my sales rep goes on a holiday, somebody else takes over, they see what kind of calls have been done. We want you to update this field because then if somebody else takes over, we understand it. Or we need to do it from a compliance reason, which is for users themselves, maybe not that beneficial, but it also safeguards them. Things like that, explain the why. It's always my biggest thing in any training I'm doing. I need to explain the why to our users. For me, a very big one is it doesn't match how we actually work. That is somebody designed this fantastic process, have maybe this whiteboard and it looks very complex, but it's actually often not how the business actually operates. And so users want to try to figure out how can they work the system to how it fits for them. And what you see then happening is things like people are starting to skip stages or ignore required fields. You can't really do that, but they maybe start to putting gibberish in there. And so it becomes meaningless. And they might try to track workarounds. Like, can I do a shortcut here? Can I maybe put something in here to quickly go to the next stage? And then often they get blamed for poor adoption. But that's actually not the case. The problem there is there's a process there, but we haven't followed that within our Salesforce implementation. Now the next one is it's easy to keep up with my spreadsheets. Well, what that is all about is people were just so set on how they were doing things. It was familiar for them, it was quick, they knew that they wouldn't really make mistakes because they knew how to do it before. And it sort of had this hesitancy in Salesforce that I think, I'm going to make mistakes, it's going to look bad on me. And so we have to start changing that idea. What we basically have to start giving them is confidence in using Salesforce. Making sure that when they go in, they actually know what they do, where to find the information, and they can do things quickly, and they can do it in a way that they feel safe in it. And also make sure that they're not feeling afraid to make mistakes. It's very difficult to break Salesforce as a user. People like admins and developers, yes, they can break the system in all kinds of different ways. And I see that regularly when I do training. But for an actual user, in general, they can't really break it. So we have to give them that confidence to say, you can't really break it. Yes, you can make mistakes. You can maybe put in the wrong information, but we can rectify it by editing a record, by updating a record. The big one there, of course, is always deleting functionality. And to safeguard that, just don't give users the access to delete important information. But apart from that, users can't really do anything wrong in the system that can be really disastrous. Now, here's something that potentially might be a bit controversial, but it's important to understand. And that is that leadership often makes these problems worse. Because often they just assume that it's a change resistance issue. It's far easier to tell the people, oh, they just don't like the new tools. Let's just make sure that, we really hammer it into it. But it's not about it. People do like new tools. They do like fancy stuff. They do like to make things more modern. The problem is if it's a bad tool, if it doesn't align with how they think doing their things. Another common reaction is, you know what? Let's chuck in more features. Let's keep updating Salesforce. Let's get adding more things in there, as if that would resolve your adoption problem. Well, that's not the case. It's much more about, let's simplify it. Let's make things run smoothly. Don't add in more, but add things in cleverly. What are your actual user stumbling blocks, and how can we solve that? That might not necessarily be building more fields or automation. It might just be scaling back, taking things away, decluttering your system. Another big one that's often a painful one for me is that often training is seen as a one-off event. We do it just before go live. We might be lucky, we give people enough time to play around a little bit in the system, but they don't really have embedded themselves into it. And so if we as an organization, as an executive team, don't give people the time to familiarize themselves with what Salesforce does, it's for them going to be very difficult to really feel confident in how they need to do stuff. It's like, here's the keys to a car. You just spend 2 hours learning how to drive it. Right, off you go on the motorway. You can see disasters happening. Yes, Salesforce necessarily doesn't give you that much of a disaster. But if we don't give people the confidence to drive it, to use it, it's going to set you up for failure. And especially if you as an organization use Salesforce for big decisions, strategic decisions, you need to make sure that you get the right information in there. So you need to give people the support and the training they need. Sometimes organizations are also very good in doing mixed messages. Like leaders might say, Salesforce is our one sort of truth. And that's really the big thing that we really push everywhere. If it doesn't exist in Salesforce, it doesn't exist. But sometimes within organizations, executive and managers still allow things like workarounds, like emails or spreadsheets. And if you're allowed to do that, it actually means, well, actually, Salesforce doesn't really matter, does it? Because we allow you to do these workarounds. The only way to really make sure that Salesforce gets adopted and embedded into your workarounds or into day-to-day work for your users is to make sure you have one very clear message across the board. We're not allowing spreadsheets anymore. It's all in the system. Now, for approval processes, we're not allowing the bypass into emails. You have to log it through the system. Things like that are really important. And it's very much a top-down approach. You as executive team, as managers, need to say, no, we only allow things in Salesforce where it's needed. Everything else, we bypass that. It's now no longer valid. And it needs to be very strong messages, very consistent, and across the board. Not one manager allows one thing and another manager allows another thing. So you heard now a lot of like bad things, so to speak, negative things. So let's now flip it around a little bit and let's talk about what actually good looks like. And that is a user-centered Salesforce experience. And so what we mean by that? Well, first of all, the process needs to match reality. Not an idealized version, not something that looks good on a whiteboard. It's actually, have you sat with your users and talked through the process and mapped it out properly? Of course, as a management team, you want to have nice to haves or things that you might want to change when Salesforce comes in. But the core is the day-to-day work of users. Does it follow their logical process? Important there is, if we slightly divert from it, in training, in onboarding, in our enablement, we need to make sure that we identify this is different and this is why. Now, second of all, we need to make sure that we do a role-based experience. You know, sales get what sales needs. An advisor, what an advisor needs. From the call center gets what a call center needs. I always call this decluttering the interface. Make sure that people only see what they need to see directly on the system. And everything else, you sort of can hide it, people can search for it. But just make sure that when they go in, they actually have what they need. No more, no less. It's often a bit of trial and error, but you can really make big gains there to stop people feeling lost and confused with all this stuff they see in the training. Now, a big one for good is enablement. And that is not just training. It's not just a couple of weeks before live, sit with your users and explain them how the system. It starts the moment you start deciding to implement Salesforce. What are your messaging around it? Do you have demo sessions? Do you have onboarding sessions? Do you have regular, say, monthly newsletters where you say, Salesforce is coming, this is what's going to happen? You know, what are our pathways after onboarding? You know, when we go live, it's often this big day or big week where all of a sudden we launch Salesforce. Or what happens after that? What is happening when new users are starting? When people move between organizations, between different companies, between different departments? You know, if you're a big conglomerate that has maybe Salesforce in all your different areas and people move around, what are you doing with people when they move around? You know, do you have things like refreshers, tip sheets? Or do you use real examples? You know, what does our training suite look like? How easy is it for people to find it? Often it's hidden on the SharePoint and people have to click to like 5 parts to find it. It needs to make sure people can access it quickly and easily. And make sure that the access is also easy to digest. Don't put up a 40-page PowerPoint or a 2-hour training video and say to people, yeah, go in there and find it. Make it quick, easy to digest, easy to action. One of the big ones we need to do is make sure that people actually see the value of Salesforce. What can really help them? Things like maybe reminders, visibility, maybe show them how quickly you can update the system. For me, the really powerful thing about Salesforce is that we can do things very quickly. If your users are complaining about certain fields and this overload of what they see in the system, get your priority to your development team and says, right, users are really complaining, can we build up a new page layout? Page layouts take only a couple of minutes to create. It's not really rocket science for your developers and your admins. So spend time there, do a quick fix, and your users will be happy. Do things like try to help them making fewer mistakes. What are the common error messages? Do we have a log somewhere with all our issues that we see and things like that? And try to make those a top priority in our sprint releases. And make sure we have clear priorities and make sure our users know the priorities. This month, we're going to fix X, Y, and Z because that's our top list. Salesforce has this fantastic way that they have their issues and they send it us to in the ecosystem, say, these are sort of 40 or 50 issues we're having. What is your top priority? And everybody can vote. Maybe you can do something like that in your organization. Create a list of 10 or 20 issues and let people vote on it. So they can help you prioritize the work list that is there. Because if it doesn't give value back, people will start to see it as an obligation, as an hindering. And they start to be negative about it. We want to make sure they have a good feeling that when they go in, they think, yes, this is really making my job easier and better. So now what can we do? What can we do quickly as an organization? What can we do quickly as an executive team? First of all, listen to complaints as if they're data. Don't dismiss them, but start decoding them. Sit maybe with your users for 15 minutes and let them explain to you what frustrates them. And actually look at what they're doing so you understand what the frustration is. Nothing is as easy as just say, yeah, whatever, send me a screenshot. No, actually sit with your user. 15 minutes is not that much time. And it gives you a lot of valuable information. Then pick up your top 3 friction points. What are your most common complaints from people? Do those first. Go for those first, make them a top priority for your development team, so that within the next sprint release, which is maybe 2-4 weeks away, here, people, we've solved your problem. Maybe do things like also one step at a time. Start with one thing. Maybe pick out where the biggest area of your organization is, maybe creating opportunity. Okay, let's look at it. Is it simple? Is it clean? Is it obvious? If not, let's redraw it. Well, how do things work like logging a call or booking an appointment or anything like that? How can you make things redesign in a nice, fluid, and simple way? And one of the biggest ones for me is start actually really looking at your enablement. Maybe create one short video, a one-pager, or a cheat sheet. Something very simple, easy to digest, simple to roll out, quick to roll out, but maybe helps your users. Maybe prioritize a very short 5-minute session that for every next team meeting, the trainer goes in there and says, right, we know this is your action point, this is your complaint. Let's show them in 5 minutes how we can solve it. This is actually what your problem is. Here is the training, the enablement. One of the big things, of course, always is show people to why. One of the big things I hear a lot is when people create dashboards within Salesforce, there's still people talking about, yeah, can I export the data because I want to manipulate it in Excel? Or I need to put screenshots in my PowerPoint because that's what I use for the management. Why? Salesforce is live. It's to the point. It's constantly updating. Why use that in the system? Just make sure that when you have a team meeting, log into your dashboard, show it to your people, discuss it. In one-to-ones, use the dashboard to say, okay, how are you doing as a user? How are you performing? What are your pain points based on what the dashboard is showing? How can we solve them? Make sure you celebrate wins. We have things like Chatter. Not many people are using it. Now you can also use Slack. All that integration. How do we celebrate as a team that we're doing well? Some people also have used it for something like the fun stuff. Can we use it to promote? Can we make sure that, when do something as well, maybe there's a sweepstake that people can get a nice prize. Let's show people that when they do stuff in the system and they do it well and consistently, they might get rewards for it. And so one of the things I want to wrap up with is that our users don't really hate Salesforce. Yeah, that is what's clear by now. What they do hate is confusion, they hate friction, and they hate feeling lost. So whenever you hear a complaint, use that as a clue, as a little breadcrumb, just to point you actually to what needs fixing. And once you've identified the real issues, make sure you then do design, clarity, and confidence to solve it. Then you start to see more and more issues will disappear. And all of a sudden, people start to using Salesforce more and start less talking about this is something I hate and more something like it's really helping me. And then you start turning around complaints into people saying, oh, this actually could help me make the system better. could we maybe do this? The user will start to think with you in improving the system instead of just complaining that it doesn't work. So hopefully this session really gave you some eye openers. I hope a lot of you taking some action points based on this. Of course, as always, feel to connect with me. I'm on LinkedIn. I have my website, my different ways you can connect with me. Love to hear from you some stories. And of course, if you have questions and if you need my help, please connect. I'm looking forward to see you next time.